Well, joining me on Outback Mornings is Matt Dickerson, and we are talking everything technology. He is the tech guy. Good morning, Matt. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Chris. Gee, it's a big ask there saying we're going to talk everything technology. We'll be here for the next month talking everything technology.
Let's talk a few things on technology then. Listen, where can I buy a Toshiba notebook? I mean, that's a famous brand in notebooks.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a famous brand, and it used to be my favourite brand, Chris. That was the only notebook that I used to have was a Toshiba. Even whatever models were coming out, it was always a Toshiba. And if you went to buy one as of basically today, you can't get them. They've officially gotten out of the laptop business. They've been 35 years in the business, but now they finally sold their final share that they still had in the business to Sharp. And it seems incredible to me when we hear about these numbers thrown around with various internet businesses of billions of dollars. It seems like nothing. You start up a little app and sell it tomorrow and it's just $1 billion to get you going. The first part of the business was sold to Sharp for only 36 million, which I know is still a fair chunk of change, but it seems like nothing compared to some of the other sales that we see. So they finally sold the last part of their business now. The last 19.1% has now been sold to Sharp, and so that's it. Basically, Toshiba no longer in notebooks, no longer in laptops. And I remember the first ones that I used to sell were huge things. I think the T1100 was one of the original models. They had a 3.5-inch floppy drive in them. They probably had 256K of memory, but they were incredibly expensive. And I remember thinking, as I was selling them, gee, I hope I can sell enough of these that I can actually get one for myself. But things have changed now.
Yeah. All right, let's talk motor vehicles. Now, Hyundai and Kia are huge manufacturers of motor vehicles in Korea now, and Hyundai have announced a new car brand. Tell us about that.
Yeah, they've announced a new car brand, and it's actually a bit confusing because Hyundai started to move into the electric space. In fact, they've got quite a good presence with electric vehicles in Australia. The Hyundai Kona is quite popular. They've got another vehicle called the Hyundai Ioniq, and they've got 3 models in that Ioniq. They've got a hybrid and a fully electric version. And now they've brought out a new brand called Ioniq. And so it's the same as the model Ioniq, but that model Ioniq doesn't actually fit into the Ioniq brand, which doesn't quite make sense. But they've focused this entire strategy on a new brand, a completely new brand for Hyundai, wholly owned by Hyundai. But all they'll do is produce electric vehicles. And they've got 3 models they've planned. Basically, by the year 2025, those 3 models will be up and running, and they'll only be electric. And I think this is the way that they're going, a bit like, say, Toyota has their Lexus brand, which is something distinguishing from Toyota. Hyundai wants their Ioniq brand to be distinguishing from Hyundai, but focus solely on EVs. So we'll see the first Ioniq, not the Hyundai Ioniq, but the Ioniq coming out next year. That'll be the Ioniq 5, and then we'll see 2 other models by the year 2025. I suppose the thing here is that obviously car manufacturers, traditional car manufacturers that are going quite well, are really keen to get into that EV space in whatever way they can. But their plans are to get a big chunk of that market. They think they'll be able to get 10% of that market by the year 2025.
Right, now, moving on, and we are talking about something that is a big problem here in Australia, heart disease. Can we tackle the huge problem of heart disease with something so tiny?
Well, I think there's some researchers at the University of Adelaide and the University of Stuttgart that believe that we can. They have 3D printed the world's smallest flexible scope. It comes in at 0.457 millimetres, so you can imagine a lens that big, and that's on the end of some fibre optic cable, if you want to call it that, but it's about the size of a human hair. And basically that will get inserted into the blood vessels of a human all the way through to their heart to actually look at the fatty deposits that might be there to work out ways that you could possibly treat heart disease. And it is obviously a major problem in Australia. There are people who die, every day from heart disease in Australia. So it is a big killer in our nation and even across the world. So if we can work out ways to try and attack heart disease using this sort of technology, then researchers are pretty excited by the concept of going forward with that.
I'm always amazed by people who learn languages, and I understand there's an earpiece that could help people learn a new language.
There is an earpiece, and I love the Douglas Adams science fiction books where you actually just put in a babel fish into your ear and that translates for you automatically on the fly. And that sounds like a great idea, but it's science fiction, unfortunately. It's not real. So still people are learning languages, But this little earpiece actually stimulates what's known as the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve, my basic knowledge of anatomy extends to the level that I know the vagus nerve basically goes through the entire body. That's about the extent of my anatomical knowledge there. But effectively, this little earpiece sits in your ear and it actually stimulates your vagus nerve, and they found that it would increase your ability to learn a new language, for example, by 13%. Now, these are only early trials, and I'm sure as they continue to get that better, just by that stimulation, I think it will make it easier for people to learn languages. And by default, if you can learn languages, you can learn other things as well. So I think there's some potential here for using some technology to stimulate our brains and make our brains effectively become better learning tools.
Now, the Apple Watch just seems to get more and more refined, and it's getting better each time Apple puts out a new watch. Can we finally track sleep with the Apple Watch?
Well, it is one of the things, Chris, that Apple has been criticised for in the past. They almost own the watch market, the majority market share, or they have the majority market share in the watch market. But sleep tracking is something that some of their competitors have and they don't have. But finally, with watchOS 7, one of the new features that's being introduced is sleep tracking, and you can actually get the beta of watchOS 7 right now from today. You can actually download that if you've got the latest version of the Apple Watch. So you can basically download that, use the new tools. There's a few new exciting little features in there, being able to share watch faces with friends and just basically download custom layouts from the web. But sleep tracking is where it's at. Being able to basically work out how long you're sleeping. And at this stage, the beta version doesn't have the ability to track the quality of the sleep, but it just tracks your sleep to get an idea of your sleep patterns and to see how much you're sleeping. And then, obviously, down the track, as they keep developing that, it'll get to the point where it allows you to see the quality of your sleep. And that's an interesting one. A lot of the technology that goes into quality of your sleep, there's different arguments about how they track quality, but they're all trying to work towards making that better. And so we work on things like cardiovascular, we work on things like how fast our heart's beating when we're doing exercise. But sleep and tracking what you're doing with sleep is really important for overall good health as well.
There's some interesting apps out too on sleep too, isn't there? Quite a few different apps.
Yeah, and again, a lot of those are tracking different things. I think they've done some clinical trials on limited things, but they're all arguing about what's the most important thing they should be tracking. At the moment, the thing that they're all doing in common is saying how much you sleep, which obviously seems important. If you're sleeping 2 hours or 8 hours, it seems like 8 hours is a better option. So they're tracking that. But then I think someone is really trying to work on cracking the code as to the best way to track the type of sleep you're getting. And there's no good answer for that one at this stage, but they're all working on it.
Matt Dickerson, thank you very much for your time this morning. Some very interesting topics. We'll talk again next week.
Sounds good, Chris. Chat next week.